This is a first, actually. This is the first time we do a live talking about mapping stuff. And today we have a great guest, not only a guest, but Jared Janacek. He's our instructor for the drone mapping courses that we have available on the platform. I know a lot of you have been asking questions about how do you even get into this drone mapping stuff? How do you get started? What kind of drone you need to have? So here we have our esteemed guest. I'm going to welcome him right now, and he's going to be able to answer any of your questions. So Jared, welcome.
Hey man, how's it going? Thanks for
Good,
having
good.
us.
Yeah, but it's exciting. We've been talking about doing this for a while, and so I figured having a
Yeah,
live Q&A like this would be a good way to, help the students figure this out and better understand. Can you tell us before we even get started? Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about your background, what you do every single day using drones, and how long you've been doing this, all that kind of good stuff.
yeah. Well, um, man, my company, Texas Drone Company, we are out there constantly mapping. That's what we do every day, all day. We've got crews out there mapping right now, and so we got started 5.5 years ago, and started getting into and understanding what the commercial drone business was going to be about. We were making a pure drone service provider play. And so we've done a little bit of everything. We've done inspections, done photography, roof inspection, cell tower, wind turbine. We've done it all, but really found our niche in the mapping side of it. And really it's more than just, hey, we were able to make some money here. It's something that has kind of become a passion of mine. I've always been interested in geography and map making and maps. I remember just taking geography in 7th grade and just loving it. And so being able to continue that and learn more and more about it and understand exactly what goes into it now, the geodesy of it all is just really cool. It's been a really fun learning and deep dive for myself. I can nerd out on super thick books about photogrammetry and LiDAR and things like that. So yeah.
Wow, that's cool. That's awesome. And of course, this
Yeah.
kind of brought us you and I attending some conference, and then I watched you teaching one of these classes, and I was like, wow, Jared is really good at teaching. So we started working together on creating this class, which has been extremely popular. There's a lot of people enrolled in there. Every day asking questions. I see the comments. I know you see them too because you get to answer all the
Yeah.
comments. So people that
Yeah.
are in the course, you get to interact with Jared on a regular basis. But I think what I want to do is I want to get started. There's already some questions popping in here. So this is we
Cool.
have a lot of beginners in here. So I see actually some familiar faces of people that we talk to on our YouTube channel on a regular basis. One Vision Aerial, he's on there. We have I saw another person here. Flight Media is also in there. Endless Skies, drone photography. So Texas Arch Drone Guy also comes in quite a bit into
Yeah.
some of the events that we put in. So the first question here from Les Ruda, he says, brand new to this kind of thing, and I would like to know the difference between surveying and mapping. And I think that's actually a great question that we get quite often from people.
Yeah. Yeah. Surveying and mapping, they kind of go hand in hand a little bit in that surveyors typically have all the right tools to make maps. So we want to differentiate between the two. And in your particular jurisdiction, there might be different legalities or legal definitions that might define one over the other.
Yeah.
Um, Universally, it's easier to define surveying. Surveying is traditionally the defining of boundary lines, so property boundaries. It's extremely important. Surveyors are licensed because there's a whole lot of historical searching and historical records that have to be justified in presenting a new boundary line. There's certainly a lot of mathematics, a lot of different nuances and subject matter that you need to definitely be versed in. And so every state, it looks a little different. Some states have a 4-year degree where that can happen. In Texas, there is no just straight up bachelor's degree to be a surveyor. There are some junior colleges and things like that have surveying programs. But even after the fact, it still requires experience in the field, recommendations from other surveyors before you can, and then a pre-certification, a surveyor and training certification, and then even you have to sit for the surveyor's test. So to be a registered professional land surveyor. So it's different everywhere you go. In California, they might define even the act of saying, this is Bob's house, even just defining a place, they might consider surveying. Where here's in Texas, it is the differentiating between property boundaries. I know that in North Carolina, there's some lawsuits going on to say that making a map is surveying. California would say the same thing. Making a map is surveying. Well, if that's surveying, then Google Maps is doing a heck of a lot of surveying, So
Yep.
some of
Yep.
these definitions need to be looked at again, and that's where you can get involved with your local jurisdiction and really have those kinds of conversations and make sure that you're speaking educatedly about it. But short answer, you got to look it up in your own jurisdiction. The best place to do that, check the Professional Land Surveyors Board. There's generally a board in each state or an engineering board, and then they will point you to the right code in your state code of registry, and you can read and interpret that language for yourself.
So you don't do you this is a discussion we hear a lot. Do you recommend that people write even the word survey on their website when they start talking about their services if they're not surveyors?
Uh, I I I wouldn't mention anything about survey.
Yep.
We do work for surveyors, is how I say it. So we do drone services for surveyors and engineering, but ultimately it is that surveyor who puts their stamp of approval on it. So, but
Yep.
just like how a surveyor in a survey office might have field crews that go out and collect his data, those guys aren't surveyors. Typically, there's one, maybe two, maybe a handful of surveyors in an office, and then there's lots of field crews that go out and collect the data. So
Yep.
we try to position ourselves as a data collector for a surveyor or an engineer, and that helps to bring you to parity with them and say, hey, we really are working with you. We're not trying to take over your work or anything like that. We just want to be a data collection tool for you.
Yep, that makes sense. Another question here that popped up. It says, "How can I use the points from a curb and gutter to make a precise map, like for building on using DJI Terra and a Mavic 3 Enterprise?" Now, I'm not actually sure what that means, but maybe you do.
Yeah. So, so typically, photogrammetry has some limitations, and we see that with some of our surface models, how they look a little gloopy, if you will. It's a technical term, but you can't really get that great of a definition on a curb all of the time. LiDAR does a little bit better of a job, but here you're talking about 8 inches. And so what typically we would do is we would do a back of curb shot and then a gutter shot, and then a little further on where we're actually utilizing our GPS equipment to go in and take manual shots of key features that we're then going to utilize in our digital surface model or in our point cloud. So there's lots of different software that can help you to do that. DJI Terra is going to, it is a photogrammatic software, so it's going to stitch the photos and then give you a surface. But that surface is just the beginning of the second part of your work to getting to line work. So manipulating that surface, putting points on that surface, doing line work on that surface is what you're discussing in that question. And so it's a little bit more nuanced. We could probably show an example. I've got some examples that we could look at if that's of extreme interest, but we'll probably circle around back to that if we have time.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great
But yeah.
idea. If we have time, we can get back to that. Here's another question here. What role does GIS software play in mapping? What does the GIS software do?
It's huge. It's huge. It's so big. Flying and capturing these maps is the easy part. We talk about that in the course. Really, it is that workflow on the back end and how can you make a deliverable for your client. So I like to use QGIS. It's free. It's open source. There's tons of plugins for it. And we even support them because it's such a great product. Esri is another, well-known product. It's a little bit more expensive. It's too expensive for me at this point, but we certainly have to understand and know what our clients are talking about when they're working with Esri. So, but QGIS is great. I mean, you can load in your Ortho Mosaic straight from something like Pix4D or Terra and drop it in, and then you could start to draw on it, run polygons on it. You could put your line work on top of it. You could put your ground control points on it. You can import delimited text files. It's just a massively huge piece of software that you definitely should spend a lot of time getting to know. QGIS is great. There's lots of tutorials online. I'm self-taught in it, so you can find everything that you'd like to know there. But we could, yeah, that's a great question.
Awesome.
We use that software every day. I've got it pulled up
Yeah.
right in front of me anyway.
Another question here. Have you found a good source for aggregated information about the camera sensor optics combinations for common drones to help figure out the GSD and spatial resolution that are achievable at different altitudes?
So this is something that is always being updated. Obviously, it's constantly on the update. I utilize a spreadsheet that we actually give access to in the course, and it's called a mapping calculator spreadsheet. It's done by Nathan. I'm drawing a blank on his last name, but Nathan has put this spreadsheet together, and he's got all those parameters built into it, where you can quickly select a camera and then input your flight speed, your shutter speed, shutter settings and things like that, and it'll give you a very detailed understanding of one camera versus another, and it'll actually plot the two together. Online, there's some things like I think Propeller has a pretty decent website where you can do a calculator and just drop down and see which drone has which footprint and how high you need to fly and what the GSD calculator is and all that kind of stuff. But there's lots of different types of little tools out there. I wouldn't say that there's one tool that rules them all just yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, I was reading the comments. Somebody said, "Can you do KML on it?" But I don't know I think they might be referring to the software you were talking about in previous question. We have a bit of a delay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
QGIS, yeah, you certainly can. Actually, I just did that today. So we had a we had previous ground control points for this project that we're shooting today, and I wanted to show those to my guys in the field and say, hey, these are the points. And it was just it was an Excel file of the points straight out of the data collector. So we plotted that in QGIS onto our map. I showed them visually, hey, this is what it looks like. These are where the points are. We took a screenshot. But then I was able to save those points out as a KML file and then email it to them. And then they could pull it up on their phones in Google Earth. And
Ah,
they knew exactly where to go to set each point like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's perfect. That's perfect. Question here about LiDAR. We do get a lot of questions about LiDAR. Should I use LiDAR for precise measurements, or what should I use?
So define what you mean by precise. Okay, LiDAR is really going to have some accuracy issues too. I've had so many people call me and just say, "Hey, I need LiDAR because I need it to be accurate." And I was like, "Well, what's your application?" Because we can be very accurate with photogrammetry. I mean, extremely accurate with photogrammetry, whereas some limitations with LiDAR might exist. So LiDAR is a laser that's sending out a pulse, and it's measuring how its time of flight back to the laser. So um, it's shooting out 100,000, 200,000 pulses per second, and not every pulse is going to come back with it exactly the same measurement. So you're going to have what's called a little bit of fuzz. So you'll have a little fuzz in your point cloud, and that is kind of your accuracy. So the better the LiDAR sensor, the less fuzz you have. What's typical in the market right now is about 5 centimeters worth of fuzz. And so we run algorithms on that fuzz. The DJI L1, for instance, has like a 10 to 15 centimeter fuzz. So if we were to shoot that laser at this wall right here, one reading to the next could be off by as many as 5 to 10 centimeters. And so that's an accuracy issue, right? So then you're relying on software and algorithms like that to help clean up that sensor. I think that's something that DJI has done a really good job with on their specific sensor. Hardware wise, it's an inferior sensor, but they worked with Terra to develop algorithms for the software that makes that inferior sensor a little bit better on the back end.
Very
So
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's not always necessarily more precise. It just depends on your application.
Right. LiDAR's perfect application is through trees, through brush, kind of tall grass, where your photogrammetry is going to be limited because it's only going to give you the surface of what it sees. So if it sees a tree, it's going to give you the top of the tree. LiDAR can penetrate through that vegetation and hit the ground. So again, we could probably pull up some examples to kind of dive into that a little bit if we need to.
Yep. Question here from Jack. It says, what are your thoughts on 3D Vista and their new 3D model with adding 360 panorama as part of the model?
360 Vista. I've not heard of that, but I think I have. I don't have a ton of it, but I'm going to look at it. Walk me 3D Vista professional virtual software. So 3D. What they're doing is combining an aerial and then creating a hotspot inside that aerial model to be able to put a 360 camera. This is where we're at right now in the industry, is we've got the ability to create that 3D model from above. We can create the 3D model utilizing something like Matterport from inside. We're really waiting until we can join all of that together. Drone Deploy has started to do something like this, where you can take a map, and then with their software, you basically take a 360 photo, and you actually have to use your phone to tag to geo-reference that photograph, and then they will put that little marker on the map. So all they're doing is geo-referencing your 360 photo, and they haven't brought that into a 3D model yet. They're just doing it on an ortho. So that's cool. Insta360 just released a GPS little thing that you can, it's like a remote shutter, but it'll also tag GPS because there's no GPS built into the Insta360 X3. So we're experimenting with that now. I think we just got it last week. And so we're trying to see, because we want to do that exact same thing. We want to be able to hotspot in our 3D model. You can do it now on the back end. We might do a construction site where we do that. But when we're taking 15 to 25 hotspot photos, it gets really cumbersome to do it in the software. So I'd like to see a full-on solution.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Other question here, different topic. Is surveying and mapping still unavailable for the new DJI RC controller and the Mavic 3 Classic?
Yes and no. So you could. They did open up waypoints, so you could try to utilize a waypoint mission and set your shutter to a 2-second shutter, and plan some waypoints and manually create a map. But really, the tough part about that is that you have to do the manual calculation for your overlap, your height, what your footprint on the ground is going to be, how often your shutter needs to fire. Is 2 seconds the perfect speed? If the shutter is locked at 2 seconds, do you have to maybe set your drone to fly at exactly 14 meters per second or something like that? So all of that stuff you're having to think about. Yes, technically you could do it. And if all you need to do is make a picture map like an ortho, yeah, I would probably utilize something like that. But I wouldn't use that for any real serious type of measurement work on resultant maps.
Yeah, so it's more entry level. If you want to see if this is for you, kind of thing, then that's a good way to do it.
Sure.
Advantages and disadvantages of flying a known point with DRTK2 and the Mavic 3E.
Okay, so what they're trying to get to is, hey, we just set up one point, and it's going to provide RTK corrections to our drone. RTK, real-time kinematic. RTK means it has to have a consistent and persistent connection to your drone. So if you're in a cell phone iffy area, maybe not the best choice, because I'm not 100% sure, but I think that the DRTK relies on an internet connection to do that. If it's on a localized Wi-Fi network, I was just talking with someone this morning about this. That's a a good way to do it because you're probably going to be consistent. We always, always, always log PPK because the PPK log is always going to be there, and RTK could fail halfway through the mission and us not know it. I've had that happen plenty of times where, we're on a multi-battery mission, we're 6 or 7 batteries in, and then you get back to the office and realize, oh, you didn't have RTK for half the battery,
No, no.
so it's not accurately tagging your images. So in that case, we still, luckily, we have a PPK log, so we're going to post-process our drone, our rover, against our base to make sure that we accurately geotag. So good thing about it, you show up on site and it's going to consistently line up, maybe month over month or visit over visit. You'll have a nice lineup. I've seen some issues depending on where your corrections are coming from and what coordinate system your corrections are in. You might be off geographically. So we consistently see about a 3.5 foot differentiation between an RTK processed model versus a ground truth model with our ground controls. So I wouldn't solely rely on it for like this is the end all be all unless you really, really comprehend and understand what you're doing, because the corrections, the drone is capturing everything in WGS 84, and you're receiving corrections probably in a NAD 83 solution, and they're probably projected, whereas your drone images are not projected, and so that can cause errors in there. So just be careful with it. It's not the end all be all.
Yep. I see what you're saying. Surveying requires, wait. Did I miss? Nope, that's it. Surveying requires a 4-year engineering degree and obtaining a legal seal that you stamp your survey data with. Somebody, I think that was from a previous connection we had, a question we had.
Yeah. And we like it that way. We want it to be that way.
Yes, I agree. I think, there's been a battle for a while, and this was a couple of years ago where there was a lot of battles between the surveying agencies or credentialing agencies that were kind of going after drone pilots. But like you said, I think that's an important thing. DJI Terra, will this work with a Mac? I don't know if you know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer on DJI Terra. I would say that we in the mapping world are firmly rooted in the Windows environment. A lot of the GIS software runs really well in Windows, and certainly a lot of the CAD programs. So like Carlson, Civil, Autodesk, things like that. Hate to break it to you, but engineering's done in Windows most of the time.
That's a shame. All right. I'm a Mac guy.
I know you are.
This is a question that a lot of people are asking, not even just in this feed, but can you recommend an entry-level drone to start mapping?
Yeah, I mean, the one you have, most mapping can be done with most drones. Like I said, there's ways around it. If you don't have a flight control software that is compatible SDK wise with your drone, but something that's attainable. The Mavic 2 Pro is a pretty good one. Right out of the box, you can map with it, and it works with different flight planning softwares. I know that some software and flight software companies are coming up with quote hacks to make things like the DJI Mini 3 Pro work with their software and things like that. But really, to get the basis for it, and this will probably help you the most when you're starting off, is just try to fly in a straight line and take photographs. When that Mavic 3 first came out, I just needed to know, is this going to work for mapping or not? So I ordered it, and it showed up, and I knew there was no SDK, but I had faith. I was like, oh, surely they'll release an SDK. And so I manually flew it in straight lines and trying to maintain my speed. And I took photographs, and I looked at it, and I had pretty consistent photographs. We knew where we should be on flight lines and stuff. And so, yeah, you can use any drone that you have. Just fly, set that shutter, take overlapping images. It'll help you to understand how much overlap you need, how much is too much, how much isn't enough, and help you get a feel for what that software is really doing for you on the back end. And it'll help you to understand, looking at your model at the end of the day, hey, this is a good model or this is not a good model. But as far as making a map, man, you just need 50-60% overlap, and you can achieve that manually pretty easily.
Yep. Interesting. Um, Somebody says, can you use LiDAR to replicate the strawberry rhubarb pie from Crosswind Landings in Payson? So we did a flight recently on our airplane channel. We went to Payson to get pie. I don't think that I would want LiDAR to replicate
Nice.
that. I'd like to get the real pie back again. That was a good pie. Here's one. I know you have an opinion on this. I know you have an opinion on pie, I'm sure too. But what do you think of WebODM to build Ortho Mosaic? Are they provided tool sufficient? Kind of weird question.
Yeah, WebODM, we're going to hear a lot. It's a free solution. It is a complicated solution. I'm a pretty tech savvy guy, and I don't understand the Docker world so much. But from my understanding, you have to install Docker, which is like an environment, and then you have to run WebODM through the Docker environment. And then, there's some, it's one of those open source type things. It's in its infancy. It will get better, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about it as more and more people start to utilize it and give them a little bit of cash. Give them money first off so that they can make it better. But WebODM, it can do much of these same things. It is going to be a trade-off for you, the user, as far as functionality versus cost. So you're either going to spend your money in your time learning WebODM, or you're going to spend your money in convenience picking up a package like Pix4D or Drone Deploy or something like that. So we're in a production environment, so we've moved past WebODM, and we're really focused in the software that saves us time right now.
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard you make that argument before of, where do you want to spend your time? And I have to agree with you there. There's always like a free version of something somewhere. Photoshop is kind of the same way too. For a long time, the GIMP was one of them, and at the end of the day, sometimes paying for the actual software just helps. So, I'm interested in pursuing 3D modeling, but I don't really know zip about it. Okay. Where do you suggest I start to learn the processes and equipment needed? Sorry for the non-pro question.
Yeah, that's all right. We service just that person. So we did a whole class on Pilot Institute of Modeling. If you ask Greg very nicely, I'm sure he could point you in that direction. But modeling, there's a great way to get started just with your phone. There's an app. There's a whole suite of apps. I don't know if you have the newer iPhones. They have a LiDAR sensor on them, if you didn't know. But you don't need LiDAR to do this. You can utilize, I like the one, it's called 3D Scanner app. And it's got like a little purple house with a scan on it. But man, it's a great tool because it teaches you some of the concepts that you need to understand when you're modeling. And most of that being camera angle and coverage and what the software is trying to do. So if you point at your mouse and you hit go and start to collect, it will start to build a surface in front of you, and it kind of gives you a wireframe. And as you move your phone, you're giving it more data, and you can see pretty quickly how the different aspect or the different views that you're giving it, how those make a better model, and then you just translate that into the drone. So get out there, scan your rooms, scan your desks, scan your car is a good one, and you'll start to see and understand a little bit more about, hey, this is what the camera movement needs to look like. I can't go from just a top down and one on the side. I need to kind of connect the dots in between on modeling. So
Yep, that makes sense. That's a great tip. Somebody's asking if the DJI Pilot app, when using a matrice, still requires manual calculation of GSD, and then required overlap, drone speed, and shutter speed, and all that if you're using for mapping a roof, for example?
Um, a matrice is kind of I guess a little bit more information there is needed, like a Mavic 3 or a Matrice 300 or a Matrice 600 or a 100. Which one are you asking about? I guess so. Follow up with that. The DJI Pilot app is getting better. I'm working with DJI and helping to explain to them some of the shortcomings that it has. Everybody knows, I said it in the video, I love DJI GS Pro. That's an old app. It's actually been discontinued off the App Store.
Mm-hmm.
They don't support it anymore. I think you can still get it, but it's been a great app for us. I've utilized all of them, from Drone Deploy to Maps Made Easy, to Pix4D Capture, all of them. They all have their tweaks and nuances. We go over some of those in the course and kind of break that down for you. But with the Matrice product line, you're probably pretty well adept in the DJI Pilot 2. And if that doesn't work for you, you can certainly do some manual calculations in something like Litchi, where you can build maps there. We've done that before too.
Yep. Somebody's asking, what is the best accuracy that you can achieve when you are doing photogrammetry using a drone?
We've been within about 1.4 millimeters,
Wow.
but, um, but yeah, that's because we were doing extreme high resolution of a solid object, and we were being very meticulous and very close, and we're using advanced softwares and stuff. So we don't need that kind of accuracy on everything, you know.
Yeah.
So what kind of accuracy? You can get pretty accurate. You're going to be spending a lot of time and a lot of effort to get that accurate. And if your project doesn't need it, you're just wasting your time at that point. So understand the accuracies of your projects first. And everybody asks, the surveyors, the engineers, they might say, well, how accurate can you be? And you turn around and say, well, how accurate do you need it to be? And everybody will say 100%. And you're like, well, that's not true. So, let's be real here. And so
Yeah.
have those conversations and seek that out for yourself, because an engineering project, you might need that kind of accuracy versus just some dirt work type stuff. They're like, get me within 2 feet. I had a customer the other day. They said, if we're within 5 feet, I was like, cool. So lots of different requirements.
I have a bad joke, but I'm not going to say it. As to what kind of drone you flew to get 5 feet of accuracy. This is kind of like doing using a Canon 1D to do pictures that you put on Facebook, right? So it's overkill, and
Right.
it depends on what you want to do. Somebody's asking. They said they took your class at the Dallas Drone Workshop, and they were asking what kind of ground markers you use at the time. What size were they? Were they 18 inches?
We typically use a 16-inch ground target, so 16-inch square. And really, that's also going to be depending upon your ground sample distance. So typically, the good rule of thumb is you want, if your ground sample distance is 1.5 inches, you want to be 20x that. So some people will say you can get away with more or less, but if you're at 20x 1.5 inches, you're at 30 inches wide. I think that's a little overkill. We typically are either going to be between 16 or 24 on the large side. So some people will even use 4 feet. Actually, when I was out in Prescott filming, I saw a ground target on the ground right next to the highway, and I got out and took a picture of it, and it was, I think, 4 feet, but that
It
was for
was
manned
huge.
aviation. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. Somebody says, I'm currently a CAD draftman for land surveyor, and we are incorporating drones into the business soon. Is there a recommended training class that you would suggest?
Yeah, there happens to be one. We not to toot our own horn here, but a lot of what our training was focused on was getting from flying to a deliverable.
Yeah.
Because as a draftsman, you understand that more than most, and so um, we, I think, touched on a few different pieces of software that we use to help us get from just the photogrammetry or the Pix4D files to a CAD deliverable that our clients can use. The more valuable you can make your deliverable, the less work for the end client, the better off you're going to be, and the more dollars you can command. So unfortunately, that does require some investment in that software. It's not cheap either. If you think the photogrammetry stuff is cheap or expensive, wait until you get to the CAD stuff. So there is investment there. There's a learning curve there. I'm still learning it, and I'm still picking up on different things. There's always 5 different ways to do something in CAD. So yeah, it's an investment in your time and money as well. So, but
So
yeah,
yeah,
our course is great for that. I think it's the second course
yeah,
where we take it from that to, we even walk all the way through the GIS software too.
yeah. So that's the modeling. No, the surveying is the second course.
It's the surveying one.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to go on the website, Marzan, pilotinstitute.com, you'll see the courses there. You can buy one course or all 3 of them at a discount. Do you know if any software other than GS Pro that will run a Phantom 4 multispectral?
I don't do a lot of multispectral work. I don't know. I don't. Basic same principles apply. Any software that you can get to do an overlap with the specifics, all of that is just math. So you can determine, if you know your sensor size and your pixel density, you can determine what kind of a footprint you will have in your focal length. You'll determine a footprint on the ground at every particular height. And then you can determine how much of that footprint has to overlap between flight lines and even before, based on your speed. So don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to do that math. It's good. It's good for you to learn and understand it and get an understanding of the breadth of it. So yeah, don't be afraid. Anything will work.
Yeah. There's a question about software. Again, maybe we can answer that, where it says, I currently have the Air 2S, and what's the best and most cost-effective way to practice and get started? Drone Deploy, Pix4D, or some other software? Maybe you can talk about the free trials that some of these have, and the trade-off between
Sure.
free versus paid and all that.
Yeah, the free trials are good at Drone Deploy and at Pix4D. I think the free trial is for 14 days, I think. It's a 14-day free trial at Drone Deploy, and then a 14-day or 15-day, I think, at Pix4D. But those are so Drone Deploy is kind of a 2-in-1. You get that flight management that's going on, but then you also get the processing that they'll do in the cloud for you. Whereas the Pix4D, it's mostly just the cloud stuff. Now you can use the Pix4D Capture app for free and capture data, but then you'd have to utilize the program. You'd have to utilize their software to process it, or you could take what you fly and capture in Pix4D Capture and process it in Drone Deploy. Those are 2 separate sides of the coin. As far as the Air 2S specifically, I know that's one, I think, that they were kind of doing a workaround because there's no straight up SDK for it.
Yep.
So, I think Drone Deploy did the workaround, and I saw somewhere that somebody identified what they were doing to utilize that, but I forget.
I think Skybras had a workaround that they used for doing their mapping, and they were just controlling the drone in itself using. They got into the actual controller for the drone and were moving it that way. But I know it's not always the easiest to do it that way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The Mavic Air 2 and the Air 2S are both supported by Drone Deploy, I believe.
Yep. All right. Well, guess what? We are getting close to the end of the comments. We've caught up at this stage. We still got a little bit of time. So if you guys have, oh no, Original Dobo is in the house. So we're in trouble now.
Oh, what's up, Ken? Hey, I got my shipping notification today for the enterprise stuff. So I was like, oh, it's always a good day when I see those.
I don't know if I want to read his comment, but he says you look like Peggy from Capital One customer service.
It's getting hot in here, man. I had to turn off my AC so y'all could hear me. So
Oh, so you could hear it. That's funny. Somebody, okay, hold on. There's another one right here. No. I'm just trying to read these comments and see if there is a question. I would like to say that I appreciate all the hard work of this channel and the advocacy for amateur drone pilots like myself. Well, you're very welcome. We try to do our best, and we bring the best too. Actually, Ken is also one of our instructor in here, and obviously Jared. So we try to tap into the industry and bring people that know what they're talking about. This is an area of interest to me, but this is unfortunately never an area that I've had time to explore and study like you have. I know you spend a lot of time not only just mapping but also reading about the technology and getting better at it. So this is really cool to see
yeah,
you grow
and
into this thing, right?
to give y'all, this is the glossary of mapping sciences, and it is just a glossary, definitions of terms. So um, there's some stuff to learn here. And each one of the
We did that.
books, if you're interested in mapping and diving really deep into it, you'll certainly learn about the ASPRS, which is the American Society of Photogrammetric Science, and that kind of a certification is something that you want to look into. You can't do any kind of text dot work or DOT work in the most states without having some sort of ASPRS certification. So definitely look into something like that. There's so much to learn. There's so much science, and just general understanding. It's pretty simple, but there's a lot of trigonometry and stuff like that goes into it. So yeah, it's a deep hole to go down if you want.
It's the geek Bible for drone mapping.
It is. It's nuts.
Somebody is
It's a little
asking.
daunting sometimes too.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure some of these terms get pretty crazy. Um, Somebody's asking about the description of the three classes. So I'm actually on the website here to give you a better understanding. And you know what we did is we decided to break this into three different concentration because we wanted to give people the ability to maybe just get the mapping fundamentals, which is the very first course. You'll learn like different use cases for drone mapping. You'll learn about the best software that you can use. We talked about this a little bit here. The different terminology, which is extremely important. And then you'll see some practice flight plans that we did here in Prescott with Jared when he was here recording the course. Some mistakes that you've learned along the way that you're sharing with people. And then what accuracy actually means. And then how to process your images using a bunch of different software, Drone Deploy, Metashape, Pix4D, and then the type of deliverables that you can provide to your clients. So this is about 3.5 hours of instruction, and that really helps you to get into the basics if you don't want to go any further, but then you can take it to the next level, which is the surveying section where we talk about limitations of the GPS and how to use ground control point, which is not used in the regular mapping course. The PPK versus RTK, you kind of mentioned these two a second ago, like the difference between the two. And then more advanced deliverables of things that you can use, and then doing corridor and terrain mapping, which is a bit more complex. There's also a lot of examples in that course. That's also 3.5 hours of instruction here with things that you can download. Actually, you have files that you can download, recreate the stuff that we did here in Prescott. And then we have the modeling is the last level, which is more of a 3D model kind of thing where you can build different facade and how to capture these models using automated and using manual flights as well. And then the difference between mapping and modeling, which we explained early on in this conversation. So yeah, there's a little bit of everything for everyone in here. And then Jared goes into a lot of detail explaining all this and taking you from not knowing anything to being a pro and being able to sell this to clients. So that's the short. I put a link in the description so you guys can go see if you want. Somebody's asking if you
Yeah,
can put
there's.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say there's a lot that you have to. It's hard to practice when you don't get out there and capture it. So try to get out there, capture that, and really practice and come away with like a scenario of what you're trying to achieve. What deliverable do you need to give to this person? What are they trying to do with the data? And test yourself in that respect, which will help make you a better, better at getting to deliverables themselves. Sometimes just going out to make a map is not quite as fun as understand, testing yourself a little bit.
Yep. Somebody's asking if you can put a link to that mapping book, or maybe just what was the title of that book you said?
This is you don't want this. This is the glossary of mapping sciences. If you go to asprs.org, they have all of these textbooks that you can look at. I think I've got. Let me see. Oh, here's one. The Elements of Photogrammetry. Again, this is a book, believe it or not, written in 1974.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it's been around a while, and it's pretty scientific, but understanding your focal planes and things like that are taught in these types of textbooks. They are textbooks. Um, lots of, this is pretty cool, kind of lots of charts and graphs and things like that you can really dive deep into. So there's a few that I would recommend. I don't see, I think I've got them in my library inside, but Foundations of LiDAR, they all have technical names. I can look them up real quick. ASPRS. But yeah, they're about $150, $160 a piece. So they are, it's getting in there and really starting to learn a craft and learn a trade. So there are people, they take this stuff very seriously, and we like to take it with them. So Airborne Topographic LiDAR Manual, the Digital Elevation Model, Technologies and Applications, the Glossary. You probably don't need Landsats, but then they have Manual Photogrammetry, Manual Geographic Information Systems, Remote Sensing, that kind of stuff. So it's cool stuff.
Wow, crazy. I think Jason beat me to it. I think he's watching the show, and he put a link to that, to those manuals in there.
Oh,
Um,
great. Yeah.
do any of the courses address the workflow and tools required for mapping the site of a building, of a structure like a building? Is that what we have in the mapping foundation? No, in the
Yeah. That's going to be, so this is, kind of a new area. Is it modeling or is it
modeling.
mapping?
Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
it sounds like it's modeling, but maybe you're wanting to make a map of a facade of a
oh
structure
yeah.
for high resolution inspection. So, same principles are going to apply, just as if you were to be shooting downwards. Now you're just shooting vertically. So you might have more and different challenges. Things like um, trees, obstacles, power lines, different things that could get in your way that might influence your depth or your focal length of the camera. So take that into consideration. And then also don't forget to maybe just ask the simplest question is, could I just get off the building by about 50 feet and take a really high resolution picture? Do I have to map this building? Sometimes you could just stitch a few pictures together. And maybe achieve the same results. We actually found that with a civil engineer, and they were inspecting the concrete decks of this apartment building as it was 13 stories tall. And they're like, oh, we want to map it and do all this. And I said, well, what ends up happening when we're really close on mapping is these decks stick out about 4 feet from the brick wall. And, now we're kind of missing some of the sides of things. And I said, could we just take pictures from this angle and get everything you need? He was like, oh, well, yeah, we could do that. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes it a lot easier. So don't get too stuck into mapping sometimes either.
Yeah, yeah, it could be resolved slightly differently. It's cool to have that model, but it may not be necessary. Um,
Yeah.
Somebody's asking just one question back. Do you guys use a ground lidar like the Leica BLK?
We don't. We used to, but we kind of know our limitations. Um, in that we're not really terrestrial scanners.
Hmm.
It kind of says it in the name of the company, Texas Drone Company, um, and we we try to stay focused in that. We've certainly explored that and had some questions around it. You could use something like a BOK 360. I think from what I've been told is that's closer akin to like, when you're trying to do models and things of an interior. If you're wanting to do true laser scanning, you're going to use something like a Faro scanner or even a Trimble SX or something like that. So think about those different technologies and your use case specifically as well.
Yep. Um, I don't see any more questions. I know people are chatting between themselves and sharing links and stuff, which is really cool. We're getting close to the hour anyway, so I'm going to make a last call for questions. If you have anything else for Jared, he's right here. He's available. This is your chance to ask what you want to know about mapping. But otherwise, is there anything that we missed, Jared? Think questions that you get in the course, maybe on a regular basis, that you want to bring up before people bring them again?
Yeah. Everybody tends to get really focused on what drone do I need to do the job. Um, I would focus more importantly on what software and
Mm.
skills do I need to master. Um, the drone truly will be the least expensive part of what you're doing on the back end to get to a deliverable. So um, this is a field that it's not a beginner type field. It is a more advanced course, and you can command a little more in your pricing because it is more advanced. It's not the quick and easy, make a lot of money type of a field. So understand that, know that you're investing in yourself in the education. Man, there was no Pilot Institute when I was getting started. There was
Yep.
nobody to differentiate coordinate reference system. I had to learn all of that on my own. And it was hard and it was a long road. And so that was a big impetus for me to partner with Greg and really put this together to serve as it's not meant to be exhaustive. It's not meant to be 100% teach you everything you absolutely have to know. But if you're interested in it, you'll know by the time you finish these courses if this is something that you want to dive deeper into or not. But it will at least give you the ability to get out there, make some maps, help some people visualize the world around them, and do it in a way that can ultimately benefit your pocketbook and also hopefully jumpstart you onto a career path that's going to take you much deeper.
Yeah, and this is an investment, right? You and I talked about this before. This is obviously a higher barrier to entry because of the equipment, because of the training, because of the knowledge and all of that. So when you get into this, you're investing into, providing higher quality product for your client, which means you can charge
Right.
more and eventually, make a higher profit. So make a better use
Yeah.
of every hour that you have available in the day. So um, good question here. What's the best way to share a huge ortho mosaic with clients?
That's a good question. So this is a challenge that you're going to run into quite a bit is that, I was just here, I've got a project pulled up right in front of me. So um, this project we processed turned into, we had about 12 gigabytes worth of imagery that we took
Mm.
for the project. And then that processed into 18.9 gigabytes just for the resulting project.
Wow.
So with those two things together, we're close to 40 gigabytes worth of data. And so you need to be able to present these in a way that people can
Hmm.
consume. So the resulting ortho for that was 1.9 gigabytes. And you can't open a 1.9 gigabyte file pretty much anywhere. So this is why a program like QGIS is a great tool. So you can open that very large ortho mosaic and kind of retain as much of that detail as you can. You can utilize something like Global Mapper, Esri. There's a few different softwares. You could try open a 2 gigabyte file in Photoshop, but it's going to struggle. So utilize those programs, and then you can save it out as a PDF. So we do this all the time where we save a 24 by 36 inch print as a PDF, and then we can stylize that how we like. We can overlay a compass rose on it and our company information and the date that the project was flown and the coordinate system and the customer's logo and all that kind of stuff. And you can style all that the way that you like, and then just hit print, and now you've got a beautiful print to give to your customers. So that's one way where you're going to learn a lot more than just the mapping side of it. You're going to need to learn the desktop publishing side a little bit of it. You're going to need to learn the CAD software, the GIS software, plug all of those things together.
That's cool. Another good question here. How important are shutter speeds versus the speed of the drone itself?
They're so important. They're so important. So, we want to take crisp photos of what we're mapping and crisp, sharp imagery. A lot of things influence that sharpness. I say this in the course. The first thing you are is a photographer. So if you can't take a good picture, albeit even of the ground, you're going to have some trouble. So ensure that you take and have a good understanding of the foundations of photography, and you know how to manipulate the exposure triangle to ensure that your pictures are sharp, tack sharp as they can be, properly exposed, and all of those things. And part of that you'll understand, and kind of in passing, because they don't have to think about it too much when they're handheld cameras, is shutter speed. Most of the time, you're just trying to hold that camera steady if you don't have a tripod. And then if speed becomes an issue, then you use a tripod. Well, our tripod is constantly moving, not the subject. We're moving, and we're moving very fast, often 30 miles an hour. So if we're trying to take a crisp photo, that means that we're going to have to compromise on our shutter speed, and we're going to have to make sure that our shutter speed is very fast, generally above 1,000th of a second. I like above 1/1250th or better. And if you're going that fast, then you're probably going to have some trouble getting light to your sensor. So you might need to pump your ISO. If it's a cloudy day, you might need to slow that drone down so that you can slow down your shutter speed to maybe 1/400th or 1/600th of a second and really freeze that subject, i.e. the ground underneath you. So all of these things you need to play with, particularly in low light. If it's a bright sunny day, auto settings are generally going to take care of you. You don't have to really worry about those things. But say you have a fixed wing drone that can only fly so slow, meaning I think the Wingtra has to fly at 35 miles an hour. That's even faster than the Mavic can fly or the Phantom 4. So its slowest speed is still very fast. And so it has to have a very fast shutter speed, 1/2000th, 1/2500th of a second for it to freeze the ground. And that's on a good day. So what do you do when you have to fly and it's cloudy and you can't fly slower than 35 miles an hour? Otherwise the drone falls out of the sky, So you need to think about it and determine what the right tool for the job is. And that can depend on the weather, Yeah, it might be a 2,000 acre job and the Wingtra sounds like a good solution, except that it's going to be cloudy and it's February, Yeah, it might not be such a great solution at that point. So yeah, good question.
Yeah, related to this as well, we have a question about mechanical shutter. How important is that? Do you really need it?
So what you really need is a camera. Just any camera will do. The mechanical shutter is kind of, I think it's what is advertised, and everybody talks about mechanical shutter. But really, what you want is a global shutter, and what that means is that it is the camera is energizing that sensor that's receiving all the light all at the same time. So that sensor is energized, and all of the light hits it at the same time. A rolling shutter is a shutter that's kind of moving across your sensor like that. And what can happen, specifically if you're looking down and moving forward, is you're going to start to see slanted lines in your pixels. And that can be a problem. Pix4D has adjusted for this, and they've written algorithms. So what they'll do is they'll essentially straighten back those images. When it detects rolling shutter, it will actually run an algorithm to bump all those other pixels up to kind of help eliminate that. What it ends up doing is cropping down your imagery, so you kind of lose the top and the sides of your images and stuff. But if you have proper overlap, it shouldn't be too big of an issue. So don't let that scare you off. But if you're going to be doing extremely precise mapping, what you want is actually called a metric camera. And a metric camera is a camera that they would have traditionally used. All the Leica systems are metric cameras, and it's basically just a fancy way of saying every possible um, dimension and in distance and everything is perfectly known, which can't be said in some of the lenses that are produced today. So
Interesting.
yeah,
We got 2 more minutes and we have 2 more questions. So this is like fast answer. We don't have to go
yeah.
fast. Can you rent survey equipment to make your own GCPs, or do you have to hire a surveyor? Or would it be better to rent a RTK drone to get accurate points one time, then consistently reuse them? It's a big question.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. Can you rent survey? You certainly rent survey equipment. So look out for your local dealer. There's a few different name brands, and they don't like to play with each other. So typically, your Trimble dealer is going to be one company. You might have a Leica dealer that's another company, or a Topcon that are different quote survey shops. So call them up, let them know you'd like to rent um, a GNSS receiver and data collector, and you'll probably want to be on a network of some kind. So we talk about this in our class, and what GPS is, what it gets you, what it does, what you need in order to set an accurate ground control. RTK drone is not going to do that for you. So an RTK drone is a rover, and it has to have a base of some kind. So you're either going to utilize a DJI RTK base, or you're going to utilize a correction network or something like that. But even your DJI RTK base, it still requires a known point that it sets up over. So if you don't have a known point at your project, you need one. And so that's the solution that you're trying to solve. So that is going to require some sort of you either have a surveyor come and set a known point for you, or ideally they're going to need to set 15 to 20 of them, what we call GCPs. If you choose to go the RTK route, I wouldn't recommend it unless you have some sort of ground truthing, which again is GCPs. So then you're back to this idea of setting 15 to 20 control points. So what I teach, you will never get away from control points. I'm always going to teach you to use control points. There is never a time when you only need RTK. Maybe there's one time, but there's not a time that I wouldn't say use ground control, because like I said, RTK, we found it to be off by 3.5 feet. And that was
Hmm.
just simply due to us receiving corrections in a different coordinate system, or in a projected coordinate system, when the drone was collecting in a geodetic coordinate system.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Last question here. Um, when you do stockpiles, do you use base plane scans before the pile is there? When the software gives you 5 different options for a base plane model, how do you know if any are actually correct?
So stockpiles, use base plane scans before the pile's there. Good luck. Most places that you go are not going to empty out their yard so that you can get a base scan. So maybe you can try to piecemeal that together. Sometimes the pile's over here, sometimes it's over here, sometimes it's across all of it. You're never going to find a solution where it's completely empty, most generally. So yeah, you got to dance around that, and it's very hard to piecemeal that together. Maybe the pile's over here, and next month it's over here. Can you take this part from this month and this part from? No, it probably doesn't work best that way. So, yeah, we'd like to do a base scan. And we've done that before on a few of our projects where we're building the plant with them, and we're there and able to give those scans. But the challenges that you run into are, that's a lot more money to do a surface comparison versus a stockpile. We charge differently for those two things because there's a lot more involved. So understanding that and understanding what your deliverable could be, and should be, and what different softwares you're going to need to do something like that, is something that you want to make sure that you have a really good grasp upon. So surface comparison, different level than just a stockpile type thing. As opposed to which plane do you use for the stockpile, there's about 5 or 6 different ways to measure the base plane of a stockpile. You could utilize the triangulated method, which for the vast majority of time is going to be sufficient. But if you've seen enough stockpiles, you know that it's not always the best solution. Just today, we were reworking with a client how we measured their piles because, hey, they had some extenuating circumstances. And so we needed to take those into consideration to make sure that we were accurately reflecting what was actually happening on the ground. That kind of communication can happen because we have that kind of experience. We have that kind of head knowledge and we've seen so many of them. When you're first starting out, man, just talk to your clients and just say, hey, what do you want to see here? What do you think is the best way to measure this? Just understand the differences between your measurements. What a lowest point versus a highest point versus a fit plane or a triangulated or an average, all of those different things. You have to have a good understanding and a knowledge of.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, we got one more that just popped in that I forgot. Somebody's asking to take the Pilot Institute course on mapping. Would I need to have the software and a drone to complete the class?
No, absolutely not. We give you enough of sample data. We went out and flew the jobs for you, and you've got free trials that if you have an email address, then you have a free trial. So sign up for that free trial and utilize that tool. Everybody can do it if you have an internet browser because you can always upload to Drone Deploy for free for 15 days. So we give you the images, we give you the ground control points, we give you everything you need, put it up and process.
Awesome.
Play with it.
Well, that's this is it, folks. Thank you
Cool.
for coming in and watching and asking your questions from the expert. And Jared, of course, thank you so much for joining us. We need to do this again soon and ask more questions from people. But thank you for your time. Thanks all for watching. And if you want more information about all this, you know where to find it, pilotinstitute.com. And we'll see you for the next one. Thanks.
Man, I'm glad I really turned my light on here at the end. Sorry about that.